The Empire's declaration arrived on Earth like a storm descending from the sky. A broadcast was transmitted to every corner of the planet. A fleet of ships surrounded the Earth from every angle, silently waiting their presence in the sky. Felt like an ominous shadow, the alien ambassador appeared on every screen in every home, his face a cold expression of superiority, his voice a calm and dismissive tone. Humans stood before their screens watching, unsure of what was happening. The ambassador's words rang out clear and loud across the planet Earth. You are nothing but an insignificant species. We have surveyed your world and found it lacking in every way. Your technology is primitive, your culture a chaotic mess. You have no place in the stars. The ambassador's voice hardened. We demand your immediate surrender or face complete annihilation. You will bow to the Empire or be erased from existence. The ambassador paused for a moment, letting the threat hang in the air. Before continuing, Earth's fate is in your hands. Humans, we offer you a simple choice: submission or destruction. Your world will be made an example of to show the galaxy that there is no place for lesser species among the great empire. We grow tired of your continued existence and will no longer tolerate your defiance. Choose wisely, for it is the last choice you will ever make. The message ended abruptly, leaving a haunting silence. In its wake, humanity stood still for what seemed like an eternity. The declaration echoed in the minds of millions across the globe. The magnitude of the Empire's threat felt suffocating. It was clear that the Empire's power far surpassed anything humanity had ever seen. They had weapons, ships, and technology that made Earth's defenses seem laughable. Even the most powerful military nations on Earth knew they stood no chance against this galactic force. The first reactions were of disbelief. Then came anger, followed by fear. But the fear quickly turned into something else, something deeper. A quiet resolve began to form in the hearts of Earth's people. They were not going to bow down to these invaders. They were not going to let their home be taken without a fight. Leaders around the world met in emergency sessions. Governments began to prepare for the worst, while the people held their breath, awaiting what would happen next. Some people tried to remain calm, others wanted to take action immediately, but deep down they all understood one undeniable truth: the Empire was vast and powerful, far beyond anything they had ever faced. Yet the humans of Earth were not going to let this threat define them. They had fought and survived wars before. They had overcome impossible odds in the past, and they were determined to do it again. The Empire had made a grave mistake, underestimating the power of humanity. The ambassador's words would be remembered not as a death sentence, but as a spark igniting the fire of resistance and rebellion across the planet. But even as they gathered their strength, humanity had no idea what their next steps should be. They could only wait and wonder if they had any chance at all against a force that seemed all but invincible. The people of Earth prepared themselves, not knowing that a decision was being made in secret deep within the planet, a decision that would set the stage for humanity's greatest fight for survival. The world leaders gathered in a vast underground facility, hidden deep within the heart of a mountain. The air was thick with tension as representatives from every corner of Earth sat around a large table. The faces of presidents, prime ministers, and military leaders were grim. Each of them knew the situation was dire. The Empire's message had shaken them to their core. The planet's survival was at stake. But none of them had a clear solution. The Empire had given Earth a choice, but no one knew how to fight back against such overwhelming power. The meeting began in silence, the room filled only with the hum of the ventilation systems and the distant sounds of computers whirring quietly in the background. After what felt like hours, the first voice broke through the tension. A man in his late 50s who had seen countless crises in his time as a world leader spoke. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his concern. We cannot surrender. We can't let them take our planet. But what can we do? We have no weapons, no ships that can stand against them. Their technology is far beyond ours. We're out of time. The Empire will strike soon. There were murmurs of agreement and nods of uncertainty. The room was divided on how to proceed. Some wanted to fight with the resources they had. Others suggested negotiation or outright surrender. But one woman sitting near the head of the table stood. Her presence immediately commanded attention. Her name was General Elena Markov, and she had been one of the most decorated leaders in Earth's military history. She cleared her throat and spoke, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We are missing one key factor in this discussion. We have something the Empire does not have, something they will never understand." The room grew quiet. Eyes turned to General Markov as she continued, her gaze firm and unyielding. "Humanity has survived against impossible odds time and time again. We are adaptable, we are resilient, we have something the Empire lacks. We have the human spirit. We may not have the technology or the ships, but we have something that can outlast their power. We have Axiom." The name echoed through the room like a spark in the darkness. The council members exchanged confused looks. Who was Axiom? Some whispered, a few knew the story, but it was a legend more than a reality. Axiom was a soldier, an ancient warrior whose story had been lost to time. His abilities were beyond anything anyone had ever seen. He was humanity's ultimate weapon, created during the wars of old, designed to ensure Earth's survival in the most extreme circumstances. But he had been placed in stasis after the conflict ended. There were no records of him except for a few scattered files buried deep within the military archives. General Markov turned to one of the officers sitting at the far end of the table. He nodded, and she gestured for him to begin. A hologram flickered to life, showing a figure, a human man clad in ancient armor, his face hidden by a helmet, but the image radiated power and authority. "This is Axiom," she said. "His abilities are unmatched. He was created to fight in the most brutal and unforgiving battles imaginable. He was humanity's final solution, but he was sealed away after the last war because his power was deemed too dangerous to use." Markov paused for a moment, letting the room absorb the weight of her words. "We have no other choice. We awaken him and let him do what he was created to do," she said firmly. "We unleash our greatest warrior." The room fell silent once more. The decision was made. The fate of Earth would rest in the hands of a single warrior who had been asleep for centuries. The facility was buried deep beneath the earth, surrounded by layers of reinforced concrete and steel. The entrance was hidden beneath a remote mountain range, known only to the highest authorities on the planet. It had been decades since anyone had set foot in this place, and even longer since Axiom had been sealed away. The temperature inside the facility was freezing cold, and the air smelled of dust and metal. The lights flickered as the team of scientists and military officers arrived at the control room. They were all tense, their hands shaking slightly as they approached the central chamber. General Markov stood at the head of the group, her face grim. She had been the one to recommend the awakening of Axiom, but now that the moment was at hand, she felt a mix of anticipation and fear. The last time humanity had seen Axiom, he had been a young man with unmatched strength and skill, but that was a long time ago, and no one knew what the centuries of sleep would have done to him, or if he would even remember who he was. The command room was dimly lit. The large screen displayed a series of readouts and status reports. The team was ready. The machines hummed with life as they activated the cryo chamber control system. Axiom was frozen in time within a vast cylindrical chamber encased in layers of protective gel and armor plating. The chamber was designed to preserve his body and mind for as long as necessary. It had been a last resort measure after the wars of the ancient past. Markov looked at the technician standing by the console. "Give the signal," she said, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of what they were about to do. The technician nodded and pressed a series of buttons. A loud hum filled the room, followed by a soft whooshing sound as the chamber began to power up. The lights above flickered, and the temperature in the room dropped even further. The giant cylinder that held Axiom began to glow, a faint blue light illuminating the dark room. It was a slow process, but the chamber began to crack open piece by piece. The protective gel began to retract as the cryo chamber thawed. Axiom's form was slowly revealed. His body was still as solid as ever. Every muscle in his frame was defined and strong. He was a perfect specimen of human strength and endurance. His face remained hidden beneath a metal helmet that had been fused to his skin ages ago, but there was no mistaking the power that radiated from him even in sleep. The energy in the room shifted, and the air seemed to buzz with tension. Markov watched closely as the final layers of gel were removed, revealing Axiom's full form for the first time in centuries. His body had not aged a day, But there was something different about him, something that marked the passage of time. He was no longer the young soldier he had been when he was sealed away. He was something else now, something more. The technician carefully activated the final sequence, and Axiom's eyes snapped open, his pupils dilated as he breathed in deeply, his senses flooded with the strange new world around him. Axiom's mind cleared quickly as the memories of his past flooded back. He remembered the wars, the battles, the reason he had been sealed away. He remembered his purpose, and it all came rushing back to him. He was humanity's greatest warrior, and the galaxy would soon know his name again. He stood slowly, his movements fluid and precise, his hands flexed, as if testing the strength in his fingers. He looked around the room, his gaze settling on General Markov. She stood there watching him with a mix of awe and caution. Axiom said nothing at first, but his voice was low and powerful. When he spoke, the words seemed to carry weight. "I am awake," he said simply. "I remember everything, and I am ready to fight." The first wave of the Empire's invasion hit Earth with terrifying speed. Their ships descended like a swarm of locusts, filling the skies above every major city across the planet. Their presence cast a shadow over the land. The people watched in horror as the enemy's forces landed, their soldiers emerging from their ships in perfect formation. The Empire's troops were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, tall armored beings with technology far beyond Earth's most advanced military. They moved with precision and confidence as they began their mission to conquer humanity. But humanity was not as helpless as the Empire believed. Axiom had already begun his work. Even before the Empire's troops touched down, he had studied their tactics, their weaknesses, and prepared himself to face them alone. The first encounter happened in the heart of a city. The Empire's soldiers moved through the streets with ease, their weapons ready to subdue any human resistance. The city was filled with panic as people scrambled to escape their homes and find safety. But then the first strike came from the shadows. Axiom moved with the speed of a storm, his body a blur, as he descended upon the Empire's troops. He was like a force of nature, unstoppable and unrelenting. He fought with precision and brutality, his every move calculated and deadly. He tore through the Empire's soldiers with nothing but his bare hands. Their advanced weapons proved useless against him. His strength was unmatched. No one had anticipated the power of a single human soldier taking on an entire battalion. The Empire's soldiers tried to fight back, but Axiom was always one step ahead. Each strike he delivered was swift and decisive. He disarmed one soldier and used their weapon against another. He took down a machine with a single punch and crushed the armor of an elite trooper as if it were paper. His movements were a perfect blend of strategy and raw power. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to show the invaders the strength of humanity. Within moments, the battalion was in chaos, their ranks shattered as Axiom continued his relentless assault. He moved like a ghost, weaving through the enemy's lines, dismantling them. With terrifying efficiency, the soldiers who remained tried to regroup, but it was clear that they were outmatched by this lone human warrior. The streets that had once been filled with fear were now filled with the sound of crumpling metal and shouts of confusion as the Empire's forces fell before the might of Axiom. Back at their command center, the Empire's leaders watched the chaos unfold on their screens. They had been confident in their superiority, but now they saw something they had never expected. A single human had disrupted their invasion plans. Their confidence turned to confusion, then to anger. They scrambled to send reinforcements, but it was clear that their forces were not prepared for what they were facing. This was no ordinary human soldier. This was something far more dangerous. As Axiom stood amidst the wreckage of the enemy's forces, his chest rising and falling with each breath, he surveyed the destruction he had caused. His eyes cold and unblinking, his mission was clear, and he had only just begun. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn just how wrong they were. Axiom wasn't just a weapon, he was the embodiment of human will and strength. And he was about to show the galaxy that humanity would never kneel to anyone. The Empire was quick to realize that the human warrior known as Axiom was not a mere anomaly. He was a force unlike anything they had encountered before. Their commanders scrambled to find a solution. They had already lost a significant portion of their invasion force in just a few hours, and their confidence in their ability to crush Earth's resistance was slipping fast. They understood that Axiom was not just a soldier, he was the very embodiment of human defiance and strength, and they knew they had to act fast to contain him. In the Empire's command ship, the Supreme General sat on his throne overlooking the battlefield, his eyes burning with fury at the reports of Axiom's devastating success. The general was a being of immense power, enhanced beyond natural limits through technology and genetic modification. He was a warlord unmatched in his brutality, but even he could not ignore the fact that the humans were proving to be far more resourceful than anticipated. This Axiom had become a symbol of resistance, one that could unite the human forces into something far greater than their individual weaknesses. General Markov sat in a darkened room on Earth. As the news of Axiom's success spread throughout the planet, she had been briefed on the enemy's movements and their response to the unexpected shift in the battle. She felt the weight of the situation grow heavier. With each passing hour, the Empire would not relent. They had vast resources and a ruthless drive to conquer, but she had something that the Empire could never understand. She had humanity's resolve, and she had Axiom. Axiom continued to strike at the Empire's forces from the shadows, taking down their patrols and sabotaging their supply lines. The invaders were beginning to panic. They couldn't predict where he would appear next or how he would attack. He was everywhere at once and nowhere at all. His presence was haunting a ghost in the machine of their carefully laid plans. Each time they thought they had him cornered, he vanished, only to reappear and strike again. It was clear to the Empire that they needed to change their strategy. They could no longer simply rely on brute force. They needed to take Axiom down. But how could they defeat something that was human yet beyond human capabilities? The Empire's Supreme General knew he had to send his most powerful soldiers to face Axiom. But this was not going to be easy. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn just how dangerous a cornered human could be. The general activated his communications device, sending out orders to his top commanders. A new strategy was in place. It would take the combined might of the Empire's best forces to stop this single warrior, but they were determined to crush this symbol of resistance before it could inspire the people of Earth any further. As Axiom prepared for his next strike, he knew the Empire would not give up so easily. He could feel their increasing pressure, their desperation to contain him. But he welcomed it. He was a product of humanity's will and determination. He was not just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the future of his people, and he would show the Empire that no matter how advanced their technology or how powerful their armies, they would never be able to break the human spirit. The next battle would be even harder, but Axiom was ready. He had fought worse wars than this and had come out victorious. He was humanity's greatest warrior, and he would prove to the galaxy that Earth was not to be underestimated. Axiom's victories had struck fear into the heart of the Empire, but they were far from defeated. Despite the losses they had suffered, they were determined to crush humanity's resistance once and for all. The Supreme General knew he could not allow Axiom to keep running rampant on Earth any longer. The Empire had invested too much in this conquest, and they would not let one human warrior stop them from taking control of the galaxy. He called for a meeting with his top commanders to come up with a new strategy, one that would end Axiom's threat. On Earth, the resistance forces were emboldened by Axiom's continued success, but they knew the Empire would strike back with even greater force. Their warships filled the skies once again, and the ground trembled with the impact of their weapons as they began their assault on the last remaining strongholds of human resistance. Axiom stood with General Markov and the rest of the leadership team in a bunker beneath the ruins of a destroyed city. Their faces were grim as they watched the screens showing the Empire's forces encroaching on their position. The situation was dire, but Axiom was ready. He had faced overwhelming odds before and had emerged victorious. Humanity had shown what they were capable of when pushed to the edge, and now they would stand together in defense of their planet. He turned to General Markov, his expression unwavering. "I will fight until the last breath," he said, his voice strong and determined. "We will not let them take our home." Markov nodded resolutely. She knew that Axiom was their greatest weapon, but the weight of the task ahead weighed heavily on her shoulders. The resistance had fought hard, But they were not an army like the Empire. They were a collection of individuals fighting for their families and their way of life. But now they had no choice but to face the full might of the Empire and hope that Axiom could tip the scales in their favor. As the first wave of the Empire's forces descended upon their position, Axiom led the charge. He moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, his body a blur of motion as he tore through the Empire's soldiers. His strength was unstoppable, his skill unmatched. He was everywhere, at once striking down enemy after enemy, his fists and feet delivering crushing blows that left nothing but destruction in their wake. But the Empire had learned from their past mistakes. They had sent their most powerful soldiers to face Axiom, hoping to overwhelm him with their superior numbers and strength. These new soldiers were enhanced to an even greater degree than before. Their armor was reinforced, their weapons deadly, and they moved with the precision of machines. But Axiom was not intimidated. He fought with even more ferocity. Each strike he delivered was an explosion of power and speed. He was the last line of defense for humanity, and he would give everything to protect it. The battle raged on for hours, the Empire's forces throwing wave after wave of soldiers at Axiom and the resistance. But he would not yield. The earth was his home, and he would defend it with his life. He moved through the battlefield like a storm, tearing down everything in his path. The resistance fighters fought alongside him, emboldened by his strength and unbreakable spirit. The Empire's forces were beginning to falter as their ranks were thinned by Axiom's unstoppable assault. But even as the Empire's soldiers began to retreat, the Supreme General knew this battle was not over. He would send his most lethal weapon yet, and this time he would not fail. The Empire had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. Axiom's victories against their elite forces had sent shockwaves through their ranks. Their soldiers were shaken and afraid. The Supreme General knew he had to act fast or risk losing everything. He called for a full-scale assault on Earth's major cities. He knew that overwhelming force was the only way to crush the growing resistance. The Empire's warships descended from the sky with terrifying speed, their massive guns aimed directly at the heart of humanity's last strongholds. The cities were bombarded with laser fire and missiles as the Empire unleashed their full might. But even as the earth trembled beneath the weight of the Empire's attack, the humans fought back with everything they had. The resistance grew bolder each day as people took up arms to defend their homes and their families. Axiom's legend spread like wildfire across the globe. People were no longer afraid. They were inspired. They knew they had a chance as long as Axiom stood by their side. In the midst of the chaos, Axiom stood tall in the center of a ruined city, his eyes focused and unblinking as the Empire's warships loomed overhead. The streets were littered with the wreckage of destroyed vehicles and shattered buildings, but Axiom was undeterred. He knew the final battle was coming. He could feel it in the air. The Empire's forces had regrouped and were preparing for a massive push to crush the remaining human resistance once and for all. The Supreme General's ship hovered above the battlefield, its massive cannons charging for the final assault. He watched the destruction unfold below him with cold detachment, but deep within his mind, he knew that this would be the decisive moment. This would be the battle that determined the fate of Earth, and the galaxy would watch as the Empire crushed the last spark of defiance. Axiom's voice broke the silence as he looked up toward the sky, his words carrying on the wind. It is time for the Empire to learn what it means to face a force they cannot defeat, he said, his words resonating with the courage and strength of every human who had fought alongside him. He was ready. He had prepared for this moment, his mind clear and his body stronger than ever before. As the Empire's warships unleashed their deadly barrage, Axiom moved with the grace of a predator, his body darting through the wreckage and chaos. He was everywhere at once, striking with incredible speed and force, each blow a testament to humanity's willpower. He tore through the Empire's troops as if they were nothing more than paper, his fists landing with thunderous force, each strike taking down multiple enemies. At once the Empire's soldiers were no match for him. They tried to regroup and retaliate, but their attacks were futile against his unmatched skill and power. The Supreme General's frustration grew as he watched his forces falter under Axiom's relentless assault. He had no idea how to stop him. The more they threw at him, the more unstoppable he seemed. The humans had a secret weapon, And that weapon was more powerful than any technology the Empire could muster. It was their spirit, it was their will to survive, and it was Axiom who embodied it fully. Axiom's rage grew with each soldier that fell beneath his fists. He fought not just for survival, but for something greater. He fought for every human life that the Empire sought to erase. He fought for the future of Earth, and as long as he stood, the Empire would never win. The final battle had begun. The Empire's forces were overwhelming in number, but Axiom was relentless. He fought with everything he had. The skies above were filled with the roar of warships as they fired down at the human resistance. Axiom moved through the chaos without hesitation, every movement precise. Every strike calculated. His strength and speed outmatched the Empire's elite forces. He tore through them like a tidal wave, sweeping everything in his path. He was no longer just a soldier, he was humanity's last hope, and he would not let them down. As the battle raged on, the people of Earth watched in awe. As Axiom tore through the Empire's ranks, they could see the hope in his actions, the belief that they could win if they stood together. The resistance fighters rallied behind him, charging into battle alongside him. As he led the charge, the Empire's forces began to falter. They had underestimated the power of a united humanity, and now they were feeling the consequences. The Supreme General watched from his command ship with growing disbelief. He had never imagined that a single human could cause such devastation. His troops were failing. Their once formidable ranks were crumbling under the onslaught of Axiom's fury. He knew he had no choice but to take matters into his own hands. He activated the final phase of his plan, a new weapon that he had been saving for this moment. It was a massive war machine designed to take down the strongest of foes. It was the Empire's last resort, and it was powerful enough to kill even Axiom. The machine descended from the clouds with a deafening roar. Its massive frame dwarfed everything in its path. Its weapons were powerful enough to destroy entire cities. With a single blast, the Supreme General believed that this was the end for Axiom, but the warrior from Earth stood undeterred. He looked up at the machine, his eyes burning with determination. He knew what had to be done, and he was ready. Axiom moved toward the machine without fear. His movements were a blur as he darted between the blasts of energy that were fired at him. He was like a ghost slipping through the cracks of the Empire's attack, each step closer to his goal. Every blow he delivered to the machine weakened it, but the machine was powerful, and the battle between Axiom and the Empire's ultimate weapon was fierce. Each strike was a thunderclap as the two titans clashed in the heart of the battlefield. The Supreme General watched with growing frustration. He had invested everything into this weapon, and now it was failing. The human warrior was too strong, too fast, too determined. He saw the look in Axiom's eyes, the unyielding resolve of a species fighting for its very survival, and he knew that he had lost this battle. He had underestimated humanity's spirit, and Axiom was the proof. With a final strike, Axiom delivered the blow that brought the machine to its knees. The Empire's weapon collapsed in a fiery explosion, and with it the hopes of the Supreme General. The remaining Empire forces began to retreat, their morale shattered, their confidence broken. Axiom stood alone amidst the wreckage of the Empire's forces, his body battered and bruised, but unbroken. The sky above was clear for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The people of Earth cheered as they watched the tide of battle turn in their favor. Humanity had won against the greatest threat they had ever faced, and Axiom was the hero who had led them to victory. As the dust settled, Axiom looked toward the horizon. His mission complete. Humanity had proven that no force in the galaxy could break their spirit. He had fulfilled his purpose, and with that he knew Earth's future was secure.